Welcome everyone to another workshop here at the test camp. This is FTCE K-6, the elementary education test, and this is language, arts, and reading. This is the first of the 4 workshops that we do for elementary education here in Florida. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Those of you joining us live online, we sure would like to have you in person, but instead, you're welcome to contribute your comments online anytime, and we'll include as many as we can in the discussions. If you join us directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel on demand, of course you have an advantage because you can pause and restart or replay that video anytime. So again, this workshop is for the general knowledge test. It's 4 parts, all one test, 4 parts, and today in this workshop we're going to talk about just the language, arts, and reading. There are workshops for the other 3 areas, yes. Okay, so you likely know by now that around here the motto is prepare, practice, perform. Everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their test. And that's because test taking is a skill which requires practice, and this is the place people come to practice those test skills. They make sure they're second nature. So to prepare here at the test camp means to understand yourself and be honest about that. Take an honest assessment of how well you know that both the test content and your testing skills. So we start by learning the test blueprint. Everything you really need to know about a test, the rules of the test and the content of the test are right there in the blueprint. This can also be a good first step to creating what we call my study plan, a schedule that includes reviewing and studying test content. All right, well, let's learn about that blueprint. Here's an overview of the elementary education test. All right, notice it's a series of 4 individual tests. Of course, each one is very different subject area, and that's why some teacher candidates and teachers decide to schedule 2 days to complete this exam rather than just 1. Have you heard this done? Where you take 2 and you can come back a second day? Has anybody heard about that? Do you know if they pay more for the second time to come back? Yeah, you'd want to check that first. If that's something you're interested in doing, you can check that at the testing center. Now, your language and arts reading test has 55 multiple choice questions, and it says up here the time allotted is 65 minutes. So just over 1 minute allotted for each question. Knowing this will help put you on a pace for success. You decide when to answer a question and when to save it for the next pass through the test. And that's one of the testing skills you'll practice here at the test camp. Now our first step is to identify what types of questions you can expect to encounter on your test. Now not what kind of formats. We know that all the questions are multiple choice. We're identifying the competencies on which the test questions are built. On this test there are 2, 3, 4, 5 competencies, and we isolate each competency with individual quizzes at the test camp. So the first quiz is based on that competency up there, reading. The next one on literature, okay, which basically means literary devices, and the third one is on writing, and we're going to look at some sample questions from all of these in just a moment. But first, let's see if you can do this. Identify the 2 remaining competencies. To the other in your group there at the table, introduce yourself. See if you can get the last 2 competencies before we get back together. Talk about it, take a couple minutes, and then we'll compare our lists. Hey, for those of you joining us today live online, share your thoughts and we'll include them there in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording and identify these last 2 competencies. We'll be here when you return and restart that video. Let's start. So down here, what was the competency your group came up with that was up? You've seen this before. Okay, so communication. You know that because you saw it in the test information guide. Wow, how about that? Okay, we'll talk more about study resources later in the workshop so that you'll know exactly how to study for these. And the last one was teaching. Did everybody have this one? Yeah, I thought so, because as we know here in Florida, the subject area exams all include this competency. Yes, but the general knowledge test did not. That's a good point. And does anybody know how much this counts for? The teaching generally counts for up to 20% or so of the test, right? All right, so let's take a closer look at each competency, beginning up there with reading. You might remember that reading is one of the 4 competencies in the general knowledge test too. Okay, what's different? In the elementary education test, it's quite different. So if you pass the GK, you're all set to go for this test. Is reading the same competency in both? Well, let's take a look. GK reading was related to comprehension. Do you remember? You had to read a passage and then identify what the passage was about. Remember that? Okay. That's different than this. This is language arts and reading. So now it's about teaching. All right. So that's how it goes. So you're not reading passages now. You're teaching English language arts and reading. Okay. All right. So what are we being tested on then? In GK reading, it was comprehension. Remember this? It was ideas, purpose, structure. Now it's coming back to you. Right. That was what you had to read. We're not going to do that in this one. It's going to be about learning to read. In the test information guide here, I'll read it for you. It says emergent literacy. So as an elementary teacher at all grade levels, teachers are expected to know these reading concepts and use them effectively in their teaching. All right. So again, we see that reading competencies on the GK are very different than the competencies you're expected to know and the skills you're expected to know about the reading process, how students learn to read. Okay, are there any questions about this, about the differences? All right, good. Very good. You get it? All right, here's this. We're going to start here then with reading with a sample question. And we're going to check and see how many honest people we have here. Who started reading up here at the top in what's called the stem? Okay, and raise your hand if you started here, reading down here first in the answer set. All right, good. We have a lot of honest people here. This is what we recommend, is starting down here with the answer set first. Does anybody know why from the other workshops? Right, it helps you focus, right? Focus on the question, and it could help you become more aware of what they're going to ask. What is the competency? Okay, let's look at another one here, just starting with the answer set only. Is this going to be a reading question? Sure it is. So now you see how that works. All right, let's go on to the second competency, which is literature. And like I mentioned, it's really literacy. What am I saying here? Devices. There you go. It's about devices. Okay. And it's about genres too. So genres and devices. Literary. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. For those listening to the recording, she said that genres are what? What are you saying these are? Categories. Okay. And then what are you saying about devices? Those are good examples, right? These are the tools used by the author. Okay, what other tools then, literary devices, there I got it, do authors use? Let's take a couple minutes at your table, see if you can come up with some more than that. We have simile, metaphor, hyperbole, there's more than that. See what you can figure out there at the table, and then we'll compare these when we come back. Hey, again, those of you joining us today live online, thanks for sharing your thoughts. We've been including them in the discussions. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause that recording again and test your knowledge of literary devices. All right, come back and join us anytime. Restart the video. Other literary devices right over here. Give me one. Personification. Excellent. How about over here? You had that one too. Do you have another one? Onomatopoeia. If I remember, that's buzz, zoom. Is that right? Onomatopoeia. Okay. How about another one? Euphemism. Okay, so we got this. All right, you know what we're talking about here. If those don't sound familiar, that's something you might want to review and study. All right, let's look at a couple sample questions. Those were other literary devices. Let's look at some sample questions, starting with the answer set. Yep, these are the genres, aren't they? All right, let's take a look at another one here. Is there something you could eliminate there? Which one is the worst answer? I don't see much. I don't know. Okay, so that takes us to the next competency. We're not supposed to be answering this. We're supposed to come up with the competencies. Okay, so the next competency can be thought about in two areas, the developmental stages of writing and the writing process. So here we got the test information guide again, giving us some guidance here. Let me see what it says here. Developmental stages of writing, scribbling, drawing letters, and it has this for the writing process. Well, that makes sense. Let's look at a couple sample questions. All right, well, you can see by the answer set that that was going to be about the stages. How about this one? Ah, there. A different kind of format, isn't it? But you've seen this before. Okay, so the writing competency next is communication. Actually, that was the writing one. This one's communication. Three main skills define this competency. Okay, penmanship, listening and speaking, and ethics. Okay, penmanship, listening, and ethics. These are all basis for what could be test questions under the competency communication. Let's look at some sample questions. That's penmanship, right? How about this one? Right, it even says listening right up there in the top. And finally, what is this skill? Ethics, exactly. The final competency, the fifth one then, is teaching. And again, there are three main skills related to this competency. Learning environment, that's one of the Florida Accomplished practices. Has anybody been to our professional education test workshops? Yes. Some of you have. You've watched them online. Well, then you know that these competencies are called the FEEPs. Is that right? Okay, and there's about learning environment. You can check these out in the test information guide. The strategies and the types of assessment. So teaching is a major part of this test. We can say it's up to 20%. Let's look at a couple sample questions related to assessment. All right, can you tell from this answer set here, is this going to be related to teaching? Sure it is. Here's another one. Looks like that is an assessment question. All related back to teaching. And here I think it's the last one. All right, this is probably a question you would mark and save, and we practice that over the training site. It's just too much reading. You wouldn't want to get slowed down and lose your momentum. So you would mark it, you would save it, you'd come back a second time around, maybe the third time around. So that's an overview of the 5 competencies on the elementary education language and reading test. For those of you who might be thinking about the secondary test, it's a bit more involved. There's a little more actual literature involved, and sometimes reading students' writing samples would be included on that too. And we do have a separate workshop for that too. Yes, and a separate training site. Okay, so what do you think these numbers might represent? Yes, you are correct. These are the number of questions on your test. And now that we previewed the 5 competencies, you likely have an idea about your stronger areas. Is that right? So what do you think is the percent to pass? How many correct answers are needed? Ah, you looked that up too. Okay, 74%. And how many questions do we say were on the test? 55. So the number of correct answers required is 41. Okay, so another way to look at that is about 3 out of 4. Another way to look at it is you can answer 14 incorrectly and still pass. This is not a test for an A or a B. It's a pass-fail test. So during the training, we'd say, go find your 41. All right, and one more thing we want to do is look at this in just one other way, and that is to say, which would you choose? If you were taking a quiz today and you wanted to get 10 out of 10, or if you had to take a practice test today, or even the real test today, and it was based on just one of these areas, time is not a factor. What is your strongest area? Or tell someone what your weakest area, your most challenging area is. Talk about this at the tables. We'll discuss your preferences as a group. All right, if you're joined us today live online, thanks again for sharing your thoughts today. This will be our last discussion break. And if you're watching this pre-recorded video, pause the recording and do, again, a little self-reflection. Which would you choose, and how do you prepare for a standardized test? We'll come back and join us anytime. You can restart that video. All right, some very good, interesting discussions about strategies for reviewing and studying for a standardized test. We talk about this in all of our workshops. There's no real right way for everyone. It's your preference. But I think we've agreed that we do need to review and study. And you'll know the areas will be personal to you. That's how you prepare for a test, including coming today. You prepared by coming today. You got some knowledge. I hope this helped you out here today. It did? Well, thank you. Good. That's good. And then another way to prepare then is to think about this. What are the tools you might need, the best and most reliable resources? Well, you're going to see this sign along the pathways during your test skills training. I know many of you already recognize this. You know this is a sign from others that have gone ahead of you who like to leave messages. So we post these signs, and in this case, their message is avoid spending your time and money on expensive resources. You just don't need them for this test. Commercial webinars are a good example. You know, why pay a fee for free test information or strategies that you can't practice? So they're suggesting too that you really don't need expensive tutors or tutoring companies for these types of tests. Save that for more challenging tests like trigonometry or chemistry or something. This only goes up through middle grades curriculum anyway. Beware, they say, of overpriced study guides. Is that a problem out there? I imagine there are quite a bit out there of people trying to make profit off of you. Many study guides, however, are either free or inexpensive. We're going to show you that in just a moment. Their main suggestion is textbooks. When we surveyed them, they said textbooks are out there everywhere. You now know the competencies, so review and study test content this way. And over at the training site, there's an area called My Resources. That's where you can find the most popular and up-to-date resources. And you can see there the test information guides are free, all published by the state. Even have some sample questions in there for you. The study guide can be bought for as low as $5. So used copy, Amazon, be at your house in 2 days. So again, many resources are either free or very inexpensive. So instead of investing time and money on resources, invest in yourself. Practice your test skills. Expect to gain confidence and personal independence that you can pass on to your students. Now your pass is going to provide admission to these training areas, and you can see up there at the top is My Test. This is the activity that enables you to understand, or check your understanding of the test blueprint. Yeah, everything we talked about here today. And you can also take a pretest before you train there in the My Test area. This is the test camp problem solving system. It's the first step to finding the correct answer is to identify the type of question by competency. Sound familiar? We've been doing that today. But you'll do a lot more over there. There's dozens and dozens of questions, so you can practice over there all you want. Quizzes and tests are available too. Good opportunity to practice your test skills while assessing your test content knowledge. Save you a lot of time in studying and reviewing if certain areas you may not have to as much as others, because the quizzes are all based on the competencies. There's even a combined quiz down there that gets you ready for the practice test and for the post-test. All the practice tests are constructed with features like those you can expect to find on test day, like a timer and the mark and save button, for example. And as you complete the training activities, you can earn points towards a professional test certificate, and that guarantees your success. So expect to perform with confidence that comes from the knowledge and the skills earned during the training. All right, well, thanks again. Let's go ahead and get started. There's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.